Hello. How are you guys? You okay? Yeah? Awesome. So the title of my talk is Bootstrap Unleashed, and I'm here to unleash your inner superpower using Bootstrap to help you guys make amazing websites, amazing apps. So on the agenda for today, we've got Bootstrap layout and CSS basics. I'm going to talk a little bit about responsive web design. Perhaps you've already listened to a talk here about that topic, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Bootstrap components, how to customize the theme for your Bootstrap site, and my favorite add-ons. And of course, there's going to be lots and lots of demos. So I'm working under the assumption that you guys know at least HTML5 and CSS3. Am I correct? Is everybody in the room at least comfortable with HTML5 and CSS3? Yeah? Raise your hand if you are. Woo, okay, give yourself a round of applause because you're going to get a lot of stuff out of this. Great. The slides and the code will be made available, and I'm going to tweet out a link as well. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, that's awesome. I'll be able to share the slides with you guys as well. So a little bit about me. I'm based in Montreal. I'm a technical evangelist, so that makes me really loud. And I like to help out startups in Montreal. I work with them in the Notman House, which is a little like a co-working / incubator / accelerator space. And I'm there helping them out with their web difficulties, any problems that they're having with their websites and their apps, and getting them up and running and hopefully surviving the grind. So why should you care? If you've just started a new project or you've just joined a new startup, you don't really have this library of CSS code that you've written in the past that you could reuse to make your website look great in any new project. So that's a problem, right? Because ideally, you don't want to be stuck with a website that looks like basic HTML5, basic ugly design, no layout to help you get your site looking great right away. And that's where Bootstrap really comes in. It comes in, it helps you bootstrap your layout, your website, and it helps it look great. And right off the bat, that's really why you should pay attention to this talk, because right after this, you'll be able to go and take a look at any of your HTML5 projects, be able to add Bootstrap to it, and then get a nice design and layout. So what is Bootstrap? Bootstrap is the most popular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript framework for developing responsive, mobile-first projects on the web. It's designed for everyone, everywhere, so anyone can use it, including beginners and advanced users. It's open source as well, so you can tinker around with it. You can see how it works. You can see you can fix it if there's a problem. And it's really made for folks of all skill levels. And it's super easy to get started. You'll see by the end of this talk, you should be able to get Bootstrap running in your website and your web app. It was developed by Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton at Twitter. And it was used there to at least provide some common consistency, some common core to all of Twitter's internal tools. But they've open sourced it, and it's grown like crazy since then. So where is it now? It's in a third iteration. It supports Internet Explorer 8 to 11, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Safari, and it's designed for all the platforms, iOS, Android. It works fine on all of them. And it really is one of the first web frameworks that was designed for a mobile-first, responsive web world. So it's really designed to work well on a mobile device. Now, you're probably wondering, when should I use Bootstrap? Well, if you're building a new website and any mobile web app, and you need a quick and easy way to prettify your website or your tool, and you want to develop over something that's stable, that has a large community, Bootstrap is for you. Don't use Bootstrap, though, if you really want to have a truly unique design and style, simply because it's so popular that a lot of websites use it, so a lot of websites end up looking the same. If you're looking to do something completely different, it's probably not the framework for you. There are other ones out there that are lesser known but equally powerful. So who uses Bootstrap? I've already answered this question. Pretty much everyone. And but nonetheless, I'm going to show you how you can change the default Bootstrap theme so that it looks different from everything else that's out there. About the community, it's huge. It's a huge community. It's the most popular project on GitHub. There's 71,000 and more stars on the project. It's got more than 26,000 forks. And think about this. It's got 581 contributors, 581 different people who've added a line of code into the Bootstrap project. So it's huge. It's a huge project, extremely popular, great community, lots of add-ons. You're definitely in the right hands if you start with the Bootstrap and you're a beginner looking to add a good framework to your website. So let's get started. I'm going to start by starting a new project. Now, in Bootstrap, it's best if you use an HTML5 doc type. In fact, you should really use an HTML5 doc type. Don't use anything else. And the reason for that is because Bootstrap really takes full advantage of HTML5 and all the new tags that are available. So in this case, what I've done is, hey, here's my doc type, HTML. Very simple, very different from the old style HTML4 doc type. And I've got my HTML language, English. And that's pretty much the basic 2 elements to get your page started. Now, Bootstrap is mobile first, so what you'll want to do is you'll want to add a meta tag to your head component and then specify the viewport. Because it's mobile first, ideally what you should want is that the width of your page be the same width as the device. That's thinking mobile first design. Now, of course, to do that, it's quite simple. You just got to add this one line of code right here. And if you're worried about writing this down, don't worry. The slides will be distributed at the end. Let's say that you want to disable mobile zoom. You've got a website, and you don't want that pinch to zoom feature on your iPhone or iOS or Android phone or Windows phone. You can actually disable that, but don't do it because normally it doesn't work as well. Although if you do want it, that's the line of code that you'd want to use. So when you're starting a new project, at the very least, if you include Bootstrap, right off the bat, what you get is a basic global display, typography, and link style. So your link style will look great right off the bat. And what's neat is that Bootstrap also includes Normalized.css, which is a project that helps you normalize the view of your website to be the same across all the different browsers. So at the least, all the different browsers will display basic elements about the same. So of course, nothing is good without a demo, so let's get right into it. I'm going to demo a Hello World app. It's sort of the classic app, and I'm going to show you what you need to get started. So I'm going to switch to my IDE right here. You guys can read this well? Yeah? Awesome, cool. So right at the top, I've got my doc type, my HTML5 doc type. I've got my HTML lang, my head tag, a UDF8 char set that's required if you're doing HTML5. I've got a little user agent compatibility tag for IE. Here's my viewport, and I've set the width of the viewport to be equal to the device width. And I've got my title. I'm including Bootstrap. And here's something that's really neat is that you can actually include a shim for HTML5. So if this website is loaded on a browser that doesn't support HTML5 yet, perhaps it's an older one, with this shim, all your HTML5 tags will at least function and work correctly. So that's what this shim does. And we've also got Respond.js, so that's needed for Bootstrap as well. Now we're going to ignore this part. This is going to stay the same for pretty much all of the demos that I'm going to show you. What we're going to go to instead is taking a look at these 2 divs. So if you're familiar with HTML5 or HTML in general and CSS, you'll notice that there's a class here. It says container. And I have another hello world, surprisingly, with container-fluid. So what does that look like? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run debug. And what this is going to do is it's going to start a small HTTP server that's going to open up, that's going to serve all my files and open up my browser. So here I am. This is what it looks like. Hello world. Straightforward so far, right? OK. I'm going to press F12, and I'm going to show you the difference between the 2 containers that I chose. One of them is fluid, one of them is not. So if I take a look at Hello World, right off the bat, the first one, I'm going to notice that the display, the size of the container is 1140, something like that. And now this is going to be, this number is going to come back, or approximately this number is going to come back again. This is the default container for a non-fluid design in your Bootstrap project. And what it's going to mean is that everything is going to fit within this little bounding box right here. Now, let's say that you want to take the page completely. You want to use fluid instead. And using fluid, what you'll notice is I get 1250 And if you add the padding, that equals to 1280. That's the resolution of my monitor right now. So right off the bat, you've got to decide if you want to do a static type container or a fluid container. But you can also mix and match them throughout the page. So you can have several containers if you're interested in that. Closing this and then getting back to the presentation. So why do I mention these two different containers? Responsive web design is what we're trying to achieve here. There's the reason why there's two different containers and why these containers will adapt to the size of the width of the browser. So what is responsive web design? For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, this is straight from Wikipedia, and I think it's an excellent definition. Responsive web design is a design approach aimed at crafting sites to provide an optimal viewing experience. That means easy reading and navigation with a minimum of resizing, panning, and scrolling across a wide range of devices, including mobile phones, desktop computers, all of that stuff. Bootstrap's going to help you be able to do that for your website. If you think about it, what does responsive web design mean, really, to you, the developer? It means that you're thinking of your user's needs instead of your needs. You're trying to adapt to the various device capabilities instead of the different configurations of devices. You're trying to adapt as opposed to just attach code specific to a config. And you're trying to future-proof your sites. If you use a responsive web design template like Bootstrap, you don't have to worry if there's all of a sudden a new tablet or a new phone that has a very different screen resolution than the one that you're used to. With a responsive web design, it'll adapt to that new thing. Here's an example. It's the Sasquatch website. And what you'll notice is that as the width changes, the layout of the website changes. On a mobile device, such as perhaps this one, you'll notice that the pictures are slightly bigger. It's full width. It shows you more text, and you can scroll a lot more. But as a result, it's a lot more readable than, say, if you squish this big one into that smaller width. This is what responsive web design looks like. It's being able to take any width and adapt to it and in a way that works well for your website. So what are the elements that we need to actually build a responsive website? Well, first, we need a flexible grid-based layout. We need flexible images and media as well. And then we probably want to use CSS3 media queries. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to talk to you about the Bootstrap Grid that you can use to build a responsive website. So Bootstrap includes a responsive mobile-first fluid grid system. That's a lot of words and to describe this grid, but they're all meaningful in one way. And this grid also scales to what I'm going to call column units, and there's 12 of them. So in theory, you could have 12 columns in your Bootstrap grid, and that's it at most. But I can show you how to customize Bootstrap a little bit later. But that's right off the bat what we're going to start off with. And these 12 units are going to scale to the device width size. Now, this is probably the most important part of this presentation. If anything, this is the part that you probably listen to. It's explaining the grid. The grid is going to come back over and over again, and the nomenclature that I'm going to introduce explaining the grid is going to be reused in different components across the Bootstrap framework. Now, these grids must be placed within a container. So remember those two container types that I showed you, container and container fluid? This is going to change the behavior and the sizing of the grid. If you've got a fluid container, the grid is not going to be stuck to a specific pixel size depending, the width of the column going to be stuck to a specific pixel size, depending on the width of the monitor. With a fluid grid, it's going to expand a lot more, and there's going to be more variability. So you're going to have to take that into account when you're designing your website. If you go to the regular container, the grid is a lot more predictable. There's actually specific pixel width that I will show you. So going back, media queries. What are media queries? They are a way to actually apply different styling depending on the properties of your device. So if it's got a width of, say, over 1,200 pixels, like this laptop, it's going to apply these styles. Now, let's take media queries and add grids to them. What you're going to notice is that if you have an extra small device, the grid is going to adapt to and take up the whole space. It's going to take all of the width of your device because your device has a very small width right off the bat. If you've got a tablet, something that has more than 768 pixels, your container width, the default one, not the fluid one, is going to be 750 pixels. And the column width for each one of the 12 columns is going to be approximately 62 pixels. If we take a look at the big desktop one instead, right off the bat, if you remember, I showed you 1140. That was the width of our container. Well, the actual container width is 1170 pixels for devices with a width larger than that. And each column is going to be approximately 97. Now, you'll notice that there's a different prefix depending on which size that you're in. And this is actually going to help you adapt your grid to the device that you're in. So if you have a column XS right here for extra small, that is going to apply for everything extra small and smaller, and then same thing across for the other prefixes. I'm going to show you different examples so you'll understand it very well by the end of this, and you'll be able to apply it to your own stuff. Now, if you're curious where this grid comes from, it actually comes from the Bootstrap website. That's the link, getbootstrap.com/CSS. You'll be able to check it out in more detail when you get the slides. So let's jump to another demo. I'm going to show you a simple grid. So I'm going to jump to here. I'm going to open my grid demo. So here we are. We can ignore this part. This is the same as before. Nothing's changed. And I'm going to show you, there's my container. Here's a little H1 tag just to say that it's the grid sample. Here's where we start talking to the grid. The first thing that we're going to do is going to add a class for row. So for every single row in your grid, this is going to be the parent div that's going to hold everything. And then inside this row, I'm going to have my columns. So what I've done here is I've set the column medium, so the middle one, to be 1 for this div. And I have 12 of them. So if I debug this, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Fortunately, my debug thing takes very little time, so I can't tell you a knock-knock joke in between debugging and building. But here we are. Here's our grid. This is what it looks like. We've got 12 columns. Now, if I close this and I start to resize it, you'll notice that this pixel width, whoops. Let's say I open my tools and I check out how wide it is. You notice that the page has about 947 pixels. All right? That's in the small range. That's the extra small range. And what you'll notice is that it takes the default behavior in the extra small. It resizes all of the columns to take maximum width. But the minute I move into the medium section, right off the bat, I have the columns retaking their initial layout, which was to have a 1-column unit as opposed to all 12. If I show you the row, the next row, here I've decided that this div is going to take 8 column units. And I'm going to specify that by putting 8. And then right next to it, I'm going to have 4. And I'm going to do the same thing for the next one. I'm going to have 4, 4, 4. So this is a 3-column layout. Now, think about it. There's different variations that you could do. You've got 12 units. You can rearrange your columns as you wish. And with that, you can build different layouts. Here at the bottom, I'm going to have the medium be 6 and 6. So it's 2-column layout. If I go back and I check it out, this layout that I specified is only applied the minute I'm in the middle spectrum of device widths. The minute I go smaller than that, it will default to the default behavior, which is to take up the whole thing. So just to show you on that grid what that means, you'll notice the minute it's extra small, it'll take auto, which is the entire width that's available to it. Now I'm going to show you what else you could do with the grid. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a mobile-friendly grid. This is a grid that is going to adapt depending on the size of your width. So again, same thing at the top. We're going to jump right into it. Here's my class row. Here's my div. Okay, and what I've done here is you'll notice I've put 2 different column specifications. So when the div width is extra small, I want this div to take up 12 column units. So I want it to take up the whole space. But when it gets to the medium section, I want it to take up 8. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the second div. In this case, I'm going to say, okay, well, at the extra small, I'm going to take 6 instead of 12. But on the medium size, I'm going to take 4. Now, if you remember, there was only 12 units. So what this is actually doing in the extra small case is actually going over 12. But Bootstrap, that's fine. Bootstrap is smart enough to know to wrap that over. So when I run this, here's what it looks like when it's larger than medium. The minute I go smaller than that, you'll notice it actually wrapped around. So it's super smart. It'll understand. The minute it gets extra small, this column is going to take up the whole size, but the one inside it, it's going to take only 6, so only half, no matter how small I get. Does that look great? Yeah? Awesome. You guys are in like slight state of disbelief that this is even possible, but it is. So the next example I'm going to show you, here we've got a 3-column layout. So in the medium, it's going to take 3 columns. The minute it gets extra small, I set it to 6. Oops. It's going to take half, half, and then it's going to overflow. Now that bottom one, it's set to column extra small 6. Now you notice I don't have a medium sizing here. By setting the extra small one, it's going to apply to all of them. So the minute I said 6 and 6, these 2 columns are always going to be 50%. They're going to be half and half. So you only need to set it once. You only need to set it several times for every single different size. But you can to be very specific and to arrange the layout as you wish. Now, sometimes you don't want to have all the columns right next to each other. You want to maybe separate them out. So I'm going to show you how to offset columns. Here's an example. We're going back into our row. We've got a 4-column unit div. And here I'm going to have a second one. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a offset of 4. So when I run this, in the medium size, you'll notice there's a big space. And I can do this for offset of 3. So in this case, I've got one equal sized hole in between my 2 columns. And let's say I want to center a column in the middle, I can apply 6 and then offset it by 3. And then all of a sudden, it's centered in the middle with this size. Now the grid is actually extremely powerful, as you can probably guess already. But one of the neat things that you can do is you can actually embed grids inside other grids. So let's say that you have a grid inside a column. What it will do is it will actually adjust the sizes so that it's still 12 units, and you don't have to worry about the actual pixel sizes of the grid. So here's an example where I've got a row, and then I've got a small specification for 9 units. So if it's anywhere in the small range and up, it's going to be 9 units. And inside this div, I've got another div that specifies another row. And it does the same thing. I'm going to say extra small 8, small 6. So when it's 6, it's going to take half of the row. And when it's 4, it's going to take the other quarter. Yeah. So if I run this, you'll notice, and I'm going to zoom in so you believe me. If you take a look there, that's I've attached a small CSS class that just puts a border around the column. And what you'll notice is that the border is actually inside the other column. So it really is building a grid inside another grid. And you could use this to adjust your layout. You can do as you wish. And what I've also added for this sample in particular is just something to show you the column height. So if I go back to the other side, you'll notice here's my other column. It actually extends all the way back down to the bottom because they both got the same column height. I'm just going to stop debugging and then... All right. So Bootstrap also comes with some default styling. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, how can we make my website look good just by default using your regular tags without putting too much extra work like we did with the grid? So it actually comes with some default styling, particularly for typography. So right off the bat, it makes your type look better. I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to jump right into the typography demo. And you'll notice this is very standard stuff. We've got my H1 tags. And I've got some body tags, some paragraphs, and there's an interesting class here. So to show you what that looks like, this is what it looks like. By default, this will come with the minute you include Bootstrap in your project. It looks a lot nicer than your default text. What's really neat, though, is let's say you've got a big headline and you want to add a small explanation next to it. You can use the small tag and add a little secondary text right next to it that's a little bit lighter than the main one. Now remember my body tag? This is my paragraph. Looks fairly normal, looks correct. But my second paragraph had this class called lead. Now, if you ever read a newspaper, typically the first top paragraph is going to be a little bit bolder just to get your attention a lot more. Well, this is exactly what that leading paragraph is doing. You can add this class, and it will make that paragraph pop up a little bit. And it'll also add a little bit extra spacing at the bottom so that your following paragraph doesn't get squished in with the bolder text. Going back to the code a little bit, here I'm going to show you some of the additions that you get with inlining text. Did any of you guys know that this tag existed? Mark? Raise your hands if you got actually seen this before. Because I actually didn't know it existed until Bootstrap showed me. And you could use this with Bootstrap to actually highlight text. You can also add a little tag to say that this text has been deleted. So if you don't know this, it'll look like it's just been there's a strike line through it. And this is to add a strike line in case the text is no longer accurate. If you take a look at what that looks like in the browser, here's my highlight, here's my strike line, my deleted text, and here's my strike line. Now you're probably wondering, okay, well, what's the difference? Perhaps visually there's not much of a difference, but semantically there is. So if you've got a semantic search engine or whatever that's taking a look deeply into the text, it'll actually discern a difference. If you add the insert tag, you can get an underline, or this line of text is meant to be treated as an addition. To bold things, you use the strong tag, the M tag. And what's really neat is that you've also got classes to help you adjust your text. Now, historically, aligning text has always been a nightmare in CSS. Bootstrap makes that really easy for you. You can use text left, text center, text right, text justify to justify the text very easily, and you can apply it to the paragraph right away. You can also do the same thing for lowercase, uppercase, capitalized. If you'll notice, there is some capital letter here, but if I take a look at my my actual class, you'll notice it's been lowercase or uppercase or just capitalized text like normal. Here's the left aligning, center aligning, right aligning. Here's the justified. So you'll notice very straight at the end. And let's say that you don't want your text to wrap, you want it to keep going. Well, if you apply the text no wrap, it'll just keep going. You've also got some really cool things to do for block quotes. If you want to quote someone in your blog post or something and you're using Bootstrap, this is how you can block quote something. And of course, you can even add a little someone famous or something for your quote. To show you what that looks like, very simple. We're using the block quote tag. And for the block quote with the little footer, we can put the paragraph, the footer, and then we have a citation tag that we could use. Let's say you wanted to align it on the other side. You just got to add a class called block quote reverse, and it will align it. But right off the bat, you see we're not using a lot of classes. So you're writing regular HTML, perhaps a little bit more semantically than you're used to. And as a result, Bootstrap will take that and actually adjust the text to make it look as it should. Now there's also lists that, as you would expect, like a bullet point list looks like a bullet point. A numbered list looks like a numbered list. But what's really cool is that Bootstrap also adds this thing called description lists. And this existed for a long time, but nobody really took advantage of it. And essentially what it looks like in the code is this DL tag with DT, description title, and description. And if you take a look at it, it actually looks very different. So right off the bat, it's a very different way to organize a list. And if you apply a different style to it, you can actually get it to be horizontal as well. So here's my description list, and now it's horizontal. Of course, there's other little things. If you wrap a section, you can actually get it to highlight code as well, or enough highlighting. If you wanted to describe, say, a keyboard shortcut, you can actually use the KBD tag, and this will basically show it like it's a keyboard shortcut or like it's on the command line. If you're a math guy and you want to show some variables, all you got to do is use the var tag, and it will adjust the styling so that it's italics. You probably can't see it very well at the bottom. Sorry about that. I'm going to show you the table demo. Now, tables have a bad rap because they were misused back in the day, early days of the web. But ever since then, and we've all moved to more powerful CSS, and we've stopped using table layouts, what we've got is tables that you could use, and Bootstrap adds some default styling. So right off the bat, you've got some nice styling. It's got a straight line to it. This is your table. If you add a class called table striped, it will stripe the rows for you. If you want borders, you can add the borders. If you want your rows to hover, you can add the hover. And you can even merge the striped and bordered together to make a striped bordered table. Now, what's really cool is if you're building a data-driven website and you've got a lot of data to show, you can actually use a table and then apply the condensed style, and it will condense it and squeeze it together. And what's neat is you can also add styling to each individual row or a specific column. And what that will do is you can highlight specific numbers if they're too low or too high. It's as you wish. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Here we are. It's quite simple. I just add my class, table condensed. To my row, I can add success. And that will give it that nice color. Or I can give it a warning or some info. I'm going to show you forms. You're probably wondering, okay, well, how do I style forms? Because forms are very useful, obviously, to get input from users straight off your web page. What you'll normally struggle with is that form styling is its own separate art. Bootstrap comes with some default form styling for you. All you've got to do is just say that this form has the role of a form, right? Seems very logical, right? Now, for every single label and input group, you'll want to put it together in a div. And in this div, you'll be able to specify that this input type is a form control. So here's my div with the class form group. And then in my input, let's say for email, I'm going to say class form control. And that's all you got to add to your form code. And if you add that right off the bat, I keep saying that right away. I keep saying that all the time, but it literally is right away. You will get this nicer styling for your form. Now you can do the same thing for an inline form. Let's say a form that's not your traditional paper-inspired form of several pages. You want it to have horizontal. Instead, you can add another class to the top of your form right here that just says form inline, and it will inline it right away. And the rest of it is exactly the same. So you don't change the form group, you don't change the form control, only add that class if you want to inline things. Let's say you want to turn it into horizontal forms. You can add the horizontal tag, and it will turn into a horizontal. And let's say that you wanted to add some validation to your form and tell your users when your form is correct or wrong or successful. It's a little bit more complicated, but not too much. What you do is you add has success and then has feedback. And that will give you, for the has success, that nice green color so your users recognize that that worked, but oh, this is the input that had the error. Probably the last demo, before we get back to the presentation, is buttons. How many of you guys struggle with styling buttons? Okay, it seems like a very common thing. All right, awesome. Well, with Bootstrap, it's no longer that difficult. What you got to do is just add a class, btn, for a button. And now, depending on the color that you want, you add a second class that just specifies this is a default button or a primary button or a success button. And it looks like this. So if you want a danger button, you just add button-danger, and it'll look like this instead. You can also change the sizes. So you can add the size button large or button extra small. And if you remember our nomenclature from the grid, it's exactly the same. It's button LG or button SM for small or XS for extra small. Now let's say you want the button to take up the whole space that is available to it. Well, that's a block level button. You do the same thing as before. You've got your button, you specify the color, you say it's a large button, and then you tell it, hey, take up all the space. So if I actually resize this, you'll notice that, it's going to adapt to the block that it has. So it'll work right off the bat. So responsiveness is a crucial part of Bootstrap, and you can use that to your advantage. Let's say that you've got an ad on your desktop site, but this flash control does not work on a mobile device, and you wanted to make it hidden. What you can do is you can add these specific classes to any element that you have in your HTML, and it will hide it depending on the width of the device. So you can say hidden, extra small, it'll be visible on all the other devices, and basically you get the idea. Just following this grid, you're good to go. Now Bootstrap also comes with some great components. Who doesn't like icons? Glyph icons are actually really awesome, and what's really cool is that the guy who created this icon set, Glyph Icon Halflings, he's included 200 of them, and he's given a license to Bootstrap to be included with the framework. The only issue is that you don't want to mix these icons with other components because they don't work as well anymore. And the other thing is that you got to make sure that wherever you put these icons, you can't have anything inside the element that you've attached this class to. So the way that you add a class, a Glyph Icon class, is literally just typing in Glyph Icon, and then Glyph Icon dash the icon that you want. So in this case, the search icon. We've also got drop-downs. And I'm not going to dive into the drop-down demo because I fear I'm running out of time. But I will show you some navigation. Let's say you want to add tabs. You will need to include the JavaScript file for Bootstrap to get this to work. But once you do, you can specify a list, and inside each list item, you can set the tab itself. You can also change the styling of the navigation. Let's say you wanted to use this button style navigation, you can. Very simple, you just change the nav to pills. If you want to add a nav bar at the top, static, attached to the page, it's very simple. I'll show you where to get the information. It's on getbootstrap.com. Let's say you wanted to add labels to a specific text. So you can label each text either with a default color, a primary color, a success color. It's as you wish. Very straightforward. You just add that class to that span. Now, if you're wondering how do I customize Bootstrap? Well, Bootstrap is actually written in Less, which is a CSS pre-processing. It's another language that you can use to write CSS that generates CSS. And Bootstrap also uses Grunt for its build system. So if you download Bootstrap and then you start messing around with the CSS and you want to see what the results are, all you got to do is install Grunt using Node and then run grunt dist. This will compile your CSS in JavaScript and it'll make it ready to go. You've also got other commands that you can check out as well. Now, I did promise you that you can change your Bootstrap theme, and there's a lot of free ones out there. So if you basically go to bootswatch.com, you can actually download all of the ones that I'm demoing right here, and it will change the colors of your Bootstrap theme, so it doesn't look like everybody else's theme out there. You've got a bunch of different choices. You've actually got a lot more than that, and then you just need to include the CSS file, and you're good to go. Here are some of my favorite plugins. Fuel UX actually adds a lot of JavaScript components. You've also got Bootstrap Growl, which adds like a notification system if you want to use one ever. Bootstrap also contains a modal component, so a dialogue. But what's really neat with this specific add-on is that it actually enhances that and gives it a lot more flexibility and power. And now, I'm a big fan of Markdown. I like the way that Markdown lets me write some of my text and it generates HTML. If you wanted to embed a Markdown editor in your website, there's a Bootstrap add-on for that, or a plugin. So if you're curious, I was using Visual Studio 2013. This is the tool that I was using. And I've also added Visual Studio Web Essentials. What's really neat is that there's a lot of Bootstrap support. So you can get this tool for free, by the way. With the Bootstrap support, it actually does some code completion for me. So I don't have to always guess what the button default, was it default, primary, or success? Like it'll basically code complete for me. And let's say I forgot to include my row class, and I just started putting some columns in, it'll highlight that for me as well. So it'll give you some error detection. So that's it. We're getting to the end. What did we learn? Bootstrap layout basics. How to use the CSS framework that comes with Bootstrap. How to use Bootstrap for responsive web designs. I showed you some of my favorite plugins. And that's it. Thank you very much. I'll happily take questions if you've got any. No questions. Oh, okay, okay. I can't see you. It's a great framework. It's just not as popular as Bootstrap. So if you're looking to have a fairly popular framework, but one that isn't Bootstrap, that's a great one to go. It does things a little bit differently, so you can't exactly translate your skills, but it works equally well. Yeah? Yes. Listen, the motivations for using something other than CSS is pretty much the same. Whether you use less or Sass is up to you. I have a preference for less, personally, because I like the way that it just simplifies things a little bit more. Sass is different. It's, if you prefer that, it's totally fine. Bootstrap actually has both versions. So. Any more questions? No? All right, great. Well, I'll be hanging around. If you've got any Bootstrap questions for me later, just tweet at me. And I'm also giving a Node.js 101 talk tomorrow. So if you're a JavaScript guy, front end, and you don't know Node or haven't been exposed to it yet, and you're curious about learning about it, feel free. It's tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. And I'll give you a very straightforward introduction to Node, similar to what I did today with Bootstrap. Thank you very much.